that is one thing I don't hold against him. I like his zoom. Welcome to Groovy Movies. My name is Lily Austin.
And my name's James Brailsford. Hello.
Hey, James. How you doing?
Yes, I'm doing all right, thank you. Although I just realised why my body clock was feeling a bit out, that goddamn daylight savings. But anyway, yes, all good, thank you.
I know, but the summer is here, which actually is kind of appropriate in a way for the film we're talking about, because it is set in a very warm, sunny place.
Yeah, sweltering.
Well, I wouldn't say sunny, actually, but sweltering, yeah. Go on.
I was just saying that the whole film just has this hot, humid feel about it. Every single shot, indoors, outdoors, you can just, it feels like a hot, humid, like oppressive atmosphere, just from the way it's shot.
Yeah, I was going to say very oppressive. Okay, I'll say what the film is called and then we can discuss this further. So we're discussing the 1967 iconic movie directed by Norman Jewison, In the Heat of the Night.
Absolutely, a film that I'd heard of but never seen. I didn't, and beyond I knew that it starred Sidney Poitier. I didn't really know much about it, you know. So it was one of those that I've heard is a classic. Heard it's like kind of got cultural significance, but that was like about as much as I knew about the film, really.
Yeah, same. Which is why I wanted to talk about it. I feel like having done quite a few new releases, I had this itch to watch some of those ones that we've heard of but haven't seen, hence watching Seven Samurai last week, which, speaking of, a little link here, Akira Kurosawa has said that In the Heat of the Night is one of his favourite films. So that's a ringing endorsement.
Absolutely, from the man himself, and this one a slightly leaner 1 hour 50 rather than the 3 hours and a half, was it? Seven Samurai. Wow.
Yeah, actually, full disclosure, because we were talking about these films around the same time in close succession. We hadn't quite figured out the order yet. I watched the first hour of Seven Samurai, I think, as I mentioned, and then actually watched In the Heat of the Night the next day because I wanted to, we had to get them both watched. And I just was like, oh, yeah, something a bit leaner. That's what I'm in the mood for. I'll come back to Seven Samurai. And it really did, hit the spot. It's a very watchable film.
Yeah. It's a police. It's many things, but one of the things is essentially it's a whodunit mystery, isn't it? It mixed in with the other things that are happening there. So there's that kind of element, that kind of the thriller, mystery, detective story that's bubbling away underneath it.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's get into it because we're kind of jumping around a little bit. But to give you a quick overview of what the film is about, it follows a police detective called Virgil Tibbs, played by Sidney Poitier. And basically, we first meet a police detective who seemingly is on duty in this diner, and quickly a body is discovered. And then shortly after that, we encounter this man sat in a train station. He's black, he's alone, he's an out-of-towner, and so the detective immediately thinks, we've got the man, the murderer, case closed.
Yeah.
So already from the get-go, you get the sense, we can tell we're in a hot place. It's kind of obvious it's the South from the environment and the accents, and you quite quickly see, okay, these detectives are not great at their job, maybe not the sharpest tools in the box, and obviously incredibly racist, but it's not spoiling it, I think, because this happens in the first few minutes, 5 minutes of the film. But the reveal of Virgil Tibbs as not only clearly not the murderer, but a detective, and not only a detective himself, but an expert in homicide. We then get this flip where, having accused this man, they then need him to help solve the case because none of them are experienced in dealing with homicides.
Yeah, and so what you get is this unlikely pairing of the kind of, police chief or the kind of the top police guy in them is called Sparta, the town that he's in, teaming up with Mr. Tibbs, and this unlikely kind of bond forms between them. And as I was watching, actually, it was interesting with the research. I just thought there is, as much as the two characters dislike each other, there's a genuine chemistry between the two, even if it is based on hatred or then a grudging respect of each other. And then to see that actually Rod Steiger and Sidney Poitier were friends in real life, I was like, oh, great. That's why I could see there was a chemistry there that felt quite genuine. So I guess they were playing into the fact that they were friends in real life.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So the film is an interesting mix because, as you said, it's sort of a detective whodunit, but it's also, I read it being described as a social thriller. So the kind of primary subject matter of the film is racism and the treatment of Black people in the South. And I guess also the kind of the outsider north-south divide is there as well. And the fact that Mr. Tibbs is from Philadelphia and really does not want to be in Mississippi where the film is set, but is kind of beholden to this mystery because he's so good at his job. So he feels this like responsibility to solve the case because he knows he's the only one who can do it. But he also, refreshingly, he's not like a placid, that kind of trope of like the good Black man, the kind of angelic figure. He doesn't want to be there. He's not only like more intelligent than them, but he's also like clearly more affluent than them. There's like a class divide that's underpinning it as well, which is definitely plays into the resentment that he's subjected to by like the police officers he's working with. So the film is kind of, I think, it's definitely a message movie. Like it's trying to, the crucial thing is this film was made in 1967. So we're right in the middle of the civil rights movement. Tensions couldn't be higher, but like also like the sense of revolution, I think, is like palpable. And this film is definitely trying to like do good and like put out this message of like, Blacks and whites, let's come together and work together and we'll resolve our differences. And that can sometimes, I think, make for a slightly uncomfortable watch. This film definitely is of its time. But I also found it amazing to watch because it's like, wow, this is really like so perfectly speaking to the era it was made in. It's like a great example of that time period, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. You're right. It's reflecting the times that were the cultural change that was happening at the time. And what was interesting to look at the filmmakers behind it. I mean, obviously, the first thing you could say is, where's the Black creative team behind this? And unfortunately, it's a product of its time. So what you've got is white liberals doing their best, I would say is the way to kind of to frame it, and what was interesting was seeing Norman Jewison, who I've not actually seen a great deal of his work, but he's kind of what you would say a slightly more socially conscious director. But then what was very interesting was seeing the cinematographer. Now, Haskell Wexler, I do know a bit more about his career and background. He's one of the more interesting cinematographers who worked in the business, because not only did he shoot like a lot of classical Hollywood films, I mean, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, he was the last person to receive the Oscar for Best Black and White Cinematography before they phased it out in Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf. So very storied career working right in the heart of Hollywood cinema. However, he was also a documentary maker and he also had quite a social, political conscience. And so his film, one of his documentaries that he directed, so he wasn't just cinematography, he directed documentaries, was called The Bus. And it was about the Freedom Riders who would deliberately go down, get interstate buses where the non-segregation law, because segregation had been outlawed, it wasn't actually being enforced. So they would get the buses to highlight the fact that segregation was still happening. And this is the cinematographer of In the Heat of the Night.
Oh, wow. Okay, I did not know that. Okay, so yeah, as far as white liberal pedigree, these guys are top
tier.
Yeah, I mean, it's generally, Norman Jewison, I think, is generally sort of very fondly in this realm. This is not his only film doing that. He also directed The Hurricane about Reuben Carter, the boxer who was like wrongly tried for murder and put away for that, starring Denzel Washington. So I found that interesting because in both these films, Sidney Poitier at the time was one of the biggest stars in the world. He'd won an Oscar, I think 2 years before. And, and then with The Hurricane, Denzel Washington, I mean, I think he was still coming up at that point. But he makes mainstream movies. These are for mass audiences, but then are exploring these heady social issues, which I found really interesting because I think I was thinking about this, whether films like this are made today still. And it's very hard to compare now with then. This is almost 60 years ago. Times have changed a lot. The social issues that are at the forefront have changed. It's kind of hard to compare. But I don't really think a film with such a strong social conscience it would be made for the mainstream now. The TV is more the realm of that. If we're thinking about, what's being talked about right now, Adolescence, this TV show that's everywhere, everyone's obsessed with, and really does speak to a big issue of our time. TV is the realm for that. And it's kind of amazing to see mainstream cinema do that as it clearly did in the 60s and it be recognized because, it was a very successful film at the box office and it also won 5 Oscars.
It did really well, yeah. I mean, I was watching it thinking if we were to make this kind of film now, what would be the difference? And you're quite right, it possibly wouldn't be a big budget film. I mean, to be honest with you, not many films are big budget these days now, unless you're a franchise film. So that's kind of, but especially, and I also think because I did wonder in the heat of the night, is Mr. Tibbs, is he essentially middle class because that would make the story and the character a bit more palatable to mainstream America at the time? Whereas now, for example, would the story be how did he work his way up the ranks? What was it like when he started out as a young detective? Or, how did he get into the system? Because the system at the time would have been incredibly racist against him. So I suspect maybe the story that was told of the character might be like an earlier period. Because, I'm watching in the heat of the night thinking, how did Mr. Tibbs get there? How did he work his way up to that level? Because that's no easy task for that character.
You're right. But I actually think, I'll put a link in the show notes for an interview with Sidney Poitier about the film, which was really interesting. He was very instrumental in the script, as it really needed to be to make it more realistic and accurate. Because as you said, it was written by. The script was written by a white man. There are various moments, and also the book. It's based on a book that was also written by a white man, and there are various things that didn't ring true for Sidney Poitier at all. And I think that actually, as he says, in Philadelphia in the North, it was not unusual for there to be black detectives on a police force. I'm not saying it would have been an easy thing to get there, but it certainly wasn't unusual. Of course, in the South, very unusual. But I also think that actually one of the things that make the film not just a kind of mawkish, white liberal film about race is that they do things that you didn't actually see in film that much, like show a black man who is affluent and well educated. I feel often it was that wasn't what was shown, and that's the stereotype that we would always see in film, right? That it's to be black is to be working class. And so I think that actually that was one of the things that made the film very forward thinking and progressive and subversive, and actually made it ring true. And actually I think a big part of why it was successful with both black and white audiences, because it didn't just play into the same old stereotypes. It's very, I will say it's I said it was a watchable film because it's filmed in a very pacey, entertaining way. But actually the content of what you're seeing is really uncomfortable to watch so much of the time.
Yeah, but as you say, it's a very entertainingly done film. In one of the elements, actually, is I didn't realise it's got Quincy Jones soundtrack. So throughout the film, and there's a specially written song performed by Ray Charles. The soundtrack is impeccable. I wasn't expecting that. Yeah,
impeccable, and also again really kind of revolutionary, because up until that point, pretty much all film had a classical score, and this is one of the first films that wasn't classical. Instead, Quincy Jones did a kind of a mix of Southern blues and jazz, to make it very much kind of grounded in the context in which the film was set. And it's a great soundtrack. It's really good.
And I have to say as well, even though I haven't seen the film before, and I only vaguely knew of it, of course, I didn't realise that this is the film where they call me Mr. Tibbs. I had heard that as a catchphrase. It's just one of those film catchphrases that kind of gets quoted or gets referenced, and I was like, oh, right, this is where it came from. And also there's a sequence where there's he's one of the most influential people in the town, and he's a genteel racist, I think is how he would be referred to, a southern genteel man, but also racist. But anyway, he slaps Tibbs around the face, but Tibbs immediately slaps him right back. And from what I understand, Sidney Poitier insisted that be inserted, because I think in the book he doesn't slap back. It's more he just receives it. Is that right? Or...
I mean, I've not read the book, so I can't say for sure. But what I read was that there wasn't even a slap in the book, but in the script they added the slap.
Right.
But he didn't slap back. He just sort of took it. And Poitier was like, if that had happened to me, I would have instantly responded. I wouldn't have just like taken it. So I'm only going to do this film if we can change that. And they were, and they agreed to. And he kind of insisted that, like, and I don't want it cut from the final film either, because I know what will happen if this film is released in the South.
He's like, yeah, we'll shoot it. Don't you worry, we'll shoot it. He'll cut the room floor. But yeah, no, it seemed like he absolutely, it's a bit, he absolutely insisted that was part of his reason for taking it. It was that sequence didn't get messed around with. And again, it's a great sequence.
Yeah, absolutely. Talking about the production, it was really interesting to read about, because so much the production itself kind of echoed the film's subject matter. Because when they were discussing where to shoot, Poitier insisted. He said, "I'm not going to go south of the Mason-Dixon line," because he'd filmed before in the South and apparently had a run-in with a group of Ku Klux Klan members. So it was, literally just not safe to be in Mississippi, which is where that had happened and where the film is set. So they actually filmed instead in a town in Illinois. So Sparta, the name of the town in the film, is actually the name of the town that they filmed in, so they wouldn't have to. They had a really small budget. It was only $2 million, which, even then was pretty small for like a big kind of mainstream movie. So so they didn't want to have to change the signage.
And it doesn't look like a cheap movie. It looks good, it looks like a nice movie. So well done, team.
Yeah, absolutely. Though I will say I did find it somewhat televisual at moments, which makes sense because the director came from a television background.
The zooms.
Yeah, didn't you? The zooms. So there's also a very cute like making of behind the scenes kind of short that I'll also link to in the show notes. And in it, Jewson talks about how he's very comfortable with a slow zoom being filmed to the beat of like music, because he'd do a lot of live TV. So he would like, so when they were shooting these zooms, he would like keep the beat for his cinematographer.
So they could time it.
Exactly, so they could time, and then afterwards Quincy Jones could like add the music in to fit with that zoom, because he'd kept time so perfectly. But to be honest, I didn't always think that the zoom was really working. It very much felt like of its time.
Yeah, I mean, like the thing about zooms that I've always felt is that you can always, like, some filmmakers won't touch them. For example, I don't think you'll ever find a zoom in a single Christopher Nolan film. However, some of them love it. For example, Quentin Tarantino, there's often a zoom in at some point in his films. But the thing about a zoom for me is that it's one of the devices that draws attention to it being a deliberate filmic device. Whereas we are used to experience the world by just walking around in it and turning our heads and moving through things. So a dolly or a track around a scene, we don't even think about those often. But when we see a zoom, we notice it because we don't experience life. We don't have a zoom lens in our head. So I think it's just, as soon as we see one, it just triggers something that reminds us we're watching an artificial thing, watching a film.
Yeah, you're babe. Yes, that makes sense.
I got my distinction in my Masters of Film Studies.
I can tell. Oh yeah, that's so true. It is just a little bit jarring. Especially, I felt there was a scene on the bridge where the camera is like next to the car, or the car's coming up to it, and I was like, "What's happening here? This is strange." But anyway, to be honest, you got
to try things out, though. I guess it's like, hey, I've got this great idea. Some of them work, some of them don't.
Yeah, and I didn't. That kind of stuff, I don't know, kind of endeared me to the film more, if anything, because it just felt such a product of the time, and this film, it just is that so much, and so I don't know, I enjoyed it, I have to say.
Yeah, no, it certainly didn't ruin the film for me. Yeah, but I also did notice the use of them. How's that?
Yeah, but getting back, sorry, we got a little sidetracked. Getting back to the filming, so they basically shot almost everything in Sparta, Illinois, but there are a couple of scenes on a cotton plantation, and so for that they had to go into the South, and apparently that when they were there, they had to stay. They were just going to be there for one day, one night. The only place they could check in was a Holiday Inn, because it was the only hotel in town that would accept multiracial residents. And during the night, a man started shouting outside and banging on the doors, trying to find his wife that he thought was staying at the motel. And Poitier literally, I think it was Jewson or maybe the producer, like like phoned him and said, just don't come to your door because it's like, this is going to be trouble if this man finds you here. And he said, I've been like, don't worry. If anyone comes to my door, I'm going to blow him away because I've got a gun under my pillow. This is how dangerous it was at that time for a black man to be going into the South, which I just find like watching the film, the thing that is so uncomfortable about it, apart from obviously like just the story and what Poitier's characters are subjected to, but it's just like thinking of him having to play this part. It's like, my God, like how draining to do that every day. And then on top of that, to make this film, he had to spend a night with a gun under his pillow, fearing for his life, have to spend 24 hours in this place. And it just, the fact that Sidney Poitier, of all, I think with between this and also Guess Who's Coming for Dinner, which funnily enough was also nominated for an Oscar in the same year as In the Heat of the Night. In the Heat of the Night won for Best Picture, but Who's Coming for Dinner was also nominated. So, I mean, amazing year for these kinds of films. It's like, God, he was really like carrying the torch for this kind of film and putting himself at risk to do it. But what I was going to say was just to like bring it back to like films of today. I mean, the thing is, we've moved on so much, and like, I mean, I don't know about now in this like Trump administration time, but like, of the recent years, it's films like Us that have been doing this kind of thing. And, that's a film that's kind of like speaking to where we've got to now with this kind of subject matter with race relations. And these films are being made actually by like black actors, black writers, black directors. So I feel like maybe it's not even fair to kind of compare now and then, because we've kind of moved to a different place so much,
Yeah, I mean, you look at Jordan Peele's work, and he's dealing with genre pieces. So he's exploring, like I say, through Us and Get Out, but also then through a science fiction film. I really loved Nope. So certainly the stories that are being told have evolved quite dramatically.
But you're right, actually. But this, I feel like In the Heat of the Night is very much like, at least nodding towards genre, like it's detective, but it's also quite like Western in the way that it's like structured. So I think
The Outsider and all that kind of stuff.
Exactly. So I guess genre is always like a good mode into talking about these things without it being, otherwise it's just kind of like social realism, which, hey, there's nothing wrong with, but not always the most entertaining way to like be as a vessel for a message, I guess.
Exactly. Putting things into genre just means that it probably broadens its appeal to an audience, because you've got the genre mechanism driving it along. So with horror, you've got the scares, the spooky atmosphere that you're wrapping up your social commentary. And here we've got a police procedural, like whodunit, but with a detective who's really good at what he does. So, that's a bit of a dramatic engine that just keeps the story chugging along, that might just keep more of audience members than if it was just, here is a film where we're going to explore race relations in the police force. That, without that underlying plot element, probably won't have as many people wanting to see it.
Totally. Though I will say, I actually, for me, what was interesting was following Mr. Tibbs' experience of working with this force and being in this small town in the South. But actually, the like whodunit of it all, I didn't feel like was, I don't know if you found that, but I found it like I wasn't completely clear on what I wasn't really clear on what Mr. Tibbs' method was, how he was getting to the next bit of information, and then and then the big reveal at the end. Like I kind of was like, how did we even get here? I'm a little bit lost, and I feel like
somebody's brother and boyfriend, and we haven't seen them in most of the film, and now they're suddenly
Yeah, it was jarring because there was this thing that you mentioned with this like wealthy, like farm owner, plantation owner, racist guy. Like that was kind of seemed like to be what the murder was relating to. And that was a big part of it. The fact that the man who'd been killed like was from the north and was about to open a factory. So that seemed to be something. And then that didn't really like go anywhere.
Red herring,
yeah, total red herring. So it was funny because I feel like I actually think that part of the story, which is quite a big part of it, really was like lacking. So I thought it was interesting that like, but it was almost like that was just the mode to get us to talk about these things and that about these bigger issues.
Yeah.
And that's done very well. I think the acting is so good. It kind of carries it along. But I think that the script could have done with another pass just to like smooth out what exactly, because, my favorite thing is watching detectives figure out, solve a murder, 7, like That was
Oh,
like
yeah.
pulling me along, you know, no matter how like silly it got. But with this, I felt like I was just like, what? Sorry, how did we get here? How are we now? You're now retracing I'm sorry. How did you figure out that the detective was peering and looking at the girl in the window? Like, where did that come from?
Yeah,
I get that you're like the best detective in the North or whatever, but like, can you read minds? What's happening, and why does that relate to anything?
It's one of those things where it's like, well, he must have read the script, basically. He knows because he must have read the script, which means it doesn't make sense, really.
Yeah,
the only way he could have known that is if he'd read the script. Yeah. But I did also think that. It was, could have done with a bit of tightening up there. But again, that's not really the main point of the film. But yeah.
Yeah, and when I was reading kind of criticism and stuff about it, I was like, no one ever goes into that. I feel like no one cares. The point is that it was successful in social commentary, and that's what people wanted, and that's what it gave us.
But I'm intrigued because I didn't realise it had 2 sequels. So They Call Me Mr. Tibbs and then something like The Syndicate. I can't remember. Maybe I've got that wrong, not The Syndicate. But basically 2 sequels. Yeah, one in the late 60s and one in 71. Or maybe one in 70, one in 71. So I've not having seen them, I reckon those are much more heavy on the procedure, the plot, the thriller, and the social commentary probably takes more of a back seat because they did that in the first one. That would be my guess as to where it goes.
No way. Okay, yeah, I did not know that. That's so funny.
Yeah, and it was also made into a TV series in the 90s, I think, mid to late 90s. So yeah.
God, about like a surprising chief and detective working together to solve crimes. I mean, it's a classic premise, I guess.
Yeah, but I don't know much about the TV series. I wonder if it was set in the 90s or set in the 60s. But anyway, yeah.
When was Starchy and Hutch released? Was that
Starsky, that was the 70s.
70s. Oh, okay. But wasn't there like a remake of that like some years later? Oh no, maybe that was
there was a feature film which had Snoop Dogg in it. Yes, I actually went to see that at the cinema. It was ridiculous. It was ridiculous.
Sorry, yes, my bad. Okay, no, I was thinking, oh yeah, the 90s. The 90s was obsessed with the 70s though, so I think I could believe that it was like a period piece, perhaps. But anyway.
Anyway, we digress.
We're digressing majorly, as always. But yeah, so yeah, as we said, In the Heat of the Night was hugely successful. Its box office, I said that, yeah, it was made for only 2 million, so pretty small budget. And I found this interesting. Domestically, it made 24 million. Internationally, it made 27,000. So it was like a big hit, but basically wasn't released at all internationally, which I guess makes sense because it is a film very much about a very American issue, very specific. But I feel like that's kind of interesting because today, you know, the rest of the world is so aware of everything that's going on in the US that I feel like, you know, of course it would be released internationally, like more widely, but I guess at the time that wasn't the case.
Yeah, no, I mean, again, it's only the past 20, 30 years where, especially the past 20 years where with American films, they're actually much more interested in the international box office because the domestic box office has been dwindling a little bit. But this was back in the heyday of cinema where people, you know, it was a regular habit that they would go to the cinema, so it was much more on their antenna, and they didn't need to look at other markets to make their money back. Whereas now it's totally inverted.
Yeah, you're right. You're so right. Yeah. So it was very successful at the box office in the US, and also, as I said, won 5 Academy Awards, including Best Picture, which what blew my mind was it was up against The Graduate, Bonnie and Clyde, and Guess Who's Coming to Dinner. I mean, incredible year for film.
That's a great year.
I think at the time 5 films were nominated, so I wonder what I didn't look up what the other one was that clearly is forgettable and hasn't stood the test of time.
Yes.
But 4 films that are like iconic to have been nominated that year. 67 was a great year. And then the Best Actor, I found this interesting. Rod Steiger, who plays the police chief, won Best Actor, which I would have thought he'd won Best Supporting Actor. In my mind, Sidney Poitier is absolutely the lead of this film. And I understand why he didn't win Best Actor because he'd won it 3 years before. So fair enough, like it's not your turn. But I thought that was a shame because, I don't know. I thought Rod Steiger was great in his role, but I really felt like Sidney Poitier like carries the film, sets the tone. He just like is magnetic in every scene. And actually, to me, he's what makes the film cinematic when it sometimes feels a bit televisual.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It's a charismatic central performance. But what was interesting to me, when I was watching the film, actually, I did think, whose perspective is this film being told from? Because actually, the first time we meet Mr. Tibbs is we're not with him to begin with. We're with this white police officer who's doing his rounds, and then like he discovers the body, and then he goes to a nearby railway station. That's where he discovers Mr. Tibbs, and he assumes he must be the culprit because he's a stranger around town. So actually, we are following the kind of the white police officer. So it's almost like it isn't really. It's not like I haven't got like a solid. This is exactly what's happening, but it does feel like maybe the perspective is more, we're kind of following it a bit more from the white policeman being introduced to this black detective, so it's not really Mr. Tibbs's film as far as the perspective, just as far as who the story's being told from,
Yeah, you're right. No, you're completely right. I think there's only one scene where Mr. Tibbs is on his own, as far as I can remember. So you're right. We don't actually get much. It's not really from his perspective most of the way through.
No, we very little have him commenting on what it's like for him to any other people. Like he's not saying, "Oh God, I'm here in the middle of this bloody godforsaken town." We don't get that experience. But it's not like hard and fast. I don't think it was a deliberate approach the filmmakers took. I just think from the way that they're used to telling stories, that's the way the story went. But yes, I was surprised that the best actor was Rod Steiger. I completely agree with that. He was a great supporting actor. Absolutely, he should have got. But I wonder if he wasn't. So was he not even? Well, he can't have been in the best supporting actor category. So. And also, was Sidney Poitier nominated for Best Actor, and he was beaten by Rod Steiger, or was he not even nominated?
Surely he was nominated. I'm going to look it up. No. Oh my gosh, he wasn't even nominated.
Ah, wow.
I assume, vote. Vote splitting allegedly, and he'd won for Lilies of the Field. That was it. I mean, that's bizarre, honestly. But it was, incredible. So In the Heat of the Night was nominated in 1968, and the Oscars that year were actually postponed by 2 days because Martin Luther King Jr. had been shot on the night the Oscars were meant to be on. So it does really, the fact that this film was nominated at that point, it really does show like how kind of in the midst of the civil rights movement and revolution that this film was, and how much it kind of does really speak to that time. And, I feel like it's kind of amazing to have films like this that kind of reflect that. I think it's so effective, and in lots of ways much more effective than, reading a book about the time or seeing like newsreel footage from it. It kind of gives you something more complex to kind of get a sense of it. So I'd really recommend this film if you want to, it's not perfect, but to get a sense of what was going on in that moment, this kind of, hugely important moment. I think it's pretty great for that.
I completely agree. It's a very good time capsule of what was going on at the time. And I would say probably if you want to watch around that, some of Haskell Wexler's documentaries that he was filming around the same time, probably very good companion pieces to those. I haven't seen them all myself. And his definitive work as a director is called Medium Cool, which is a blend of fiction and factual. So it's got fictional characters in real world situations, real characters in fictional situations. Never seen it. Sounds great.
Okay, yeah, I'm very intrigued. We've got to watch some of those. All right, so to finish up, what would you give it? A Letterboxd rating? What would you give it?
Oh, I'm going to give it a 3 stars.
Oh, I love it. You're way more harsh than me.
Well, we can't. It would be boring if we both were in agreement, though, Lily, right? All the time?
I agree, though. For our Letterboxd, I just kind of do a mean. So I was going to give it.
Oh no, I'm pulling your. Oh no, I'm pulling.
No, that's good. It's good. I'm giving it a 4, so we'll give it a 3.5. I think
there we go.
Yeah, I don't think it's a perfect film, as we talked about. Like, it looks a little televisual. The detective story could have done with being made more sensical.
Yeah.
But as you say, as a time capsule of the 1960s, it really was like, I don't know, just incredible to watch. And so for that, and for Sidney Poitier's performance, which does deserve an Oscar, I'd give it 4 stars.
Yeah, I mean, essentially, my comments are similar to yours. Is like this stuff of it doesn't work so well, but it's definitely the Sidney Poitier performance that really stands out and makes it worth watching. But for me, what can I say? I'm more of a harsh marker, I guess. A 3. I just need to make it. You know, when I give a 5, it's earned that 5 from me anyway. You know, I've got to be harsh on that. It's got the Bell distribution curve. They can't all be 4s and 5s.
No, you're right. I know you're right. It's hard. It's very hard with an older film, though. I feel like I for some reason I find that more difficult to be harsh about. Like, I think I'm much more critical of a director. If a director was using a zoom now, I'd be like 3 stars, get the fuck out of here. But I'm like, it was the 60s. They were trying new things, experimentation.
But then Tarantino uses zoom, and he kind of gets away with it.
I was going to say, he does a good zoom, though. That is one thing I don't hold against him. I like his zoom.
He chooses his moments well.
All right, well, thank you everyone for listening to another episode of Groovy Movies.
Yes, thank you as always. And if you could find the time to leave us a like or a review, or if you aren't subscribed, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. All of this helps get our podcast out to a bigger audience.
So we'll see you next week for Fatal Attraction, because I know last week I said we were talking about it this week. That was wrong. We're talking about it In the Heat of the Night. But next week, Fatal Attraction. Come back and listen. Bye.
Bye.
Groovy Movies is produced and edited by us, Lily Austin and James Brailsford. And James also produced the theme music.
Follow us on Instagram and TikTok at Groovy Movies Pod, or email us groovymoviespod@gmail.com.
For more information about the films discussed, check out the show notes.